Ooh, welcome. Okay, let's read. Law 46. Never appear too perfect. Judgment. Appearing better than others is always dangerous, but most dangerous of all is to appear to have no faults or weaknesses. Every envy creates silent enemies. It's smart to occasionally display defects and admit to harmless vices in order to deflect envy and appear more human and approachable. Only gods and the dead can seem perfect with impunity. Transgression of the law. Joe Orton met Kenneth Halliwell at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, London in 1953, where both had enrolled as acting students. They soon became lovers, and moved in together. Halliwell, 25 at the time, was 7 years older than Orton and seemed the more confident of the two, but neither had much talent as actors. And after graduating, having settled down together in the dank London apartment, they decided to give up acting and collaborate as writers instead. Halliwell's inheritance was enough to keep them from having to find work for a few years, and in the beginning, he was also the driving force behind the stories and novels they wrote. He would dictate to Orton, who would type the manuscript, occasionally interjecting his own lines and ideas. Their first efforts attracted some interest from literary agents, but it sputtered. The promise they had shown was leading nowhere. Eventually, the inheritance money ran out, and the pair had to look for work. Their collaborations were less enthusiastic and less frequent. The future looked bleak. In 1957, Orton began to write on his own, but it wasn't until 5 years later, when the lovers were jailed for 6 months for defacing dozens of library books, that he began to find his voices, perhaps not by chance. This was the first time he and Halliwell had been separated in 9 years. He came out of prison determined to express his contempt for English society in the form of theatrical farces. He and Halliwell moved back in together, but now the roles were reversed. Orton did the writing while Halliwell put in comments and ideas. In 1964, Joe Orton completed his first full-length play, Entertaining Mr. Solane. The play made it to London's West End, where it received brilliant reviews. A great new writer had emerged from nowhere. Now success followed success at a dizzying pace. In 1966, Orton had a hit with his play Loot, and his popularity soared. Soon commissions came in from all sides, including from the Beatles, who paid Orton handsomely to write them a film script. Everything was pointing upwards, everything except Orton's relationship with Kenneth Halliwell. The pair still lived together, but as Orton grew successful, Halliwell began to deteriorate. Watching his lover become the center of attention, he suffered the humiliation of becoming a kind of person, assistant to the playwright. His role in what had once been a collaboration growing smaller and smaller. In the 1950s, he had supported Orton with his inheritance. Now Orton supported him at a party or among friends. People would naturally gravitate towards Orton. He was charming, and his mood was almost always buoyant. Unlike the handsome Orton, Halliwell was bold and awkward. His defensiveness made people want to avoid him. With Orton's success, the couple's problem only worsened. Halliwell's moods made their life together impossible. Orton claimed to want to leave him and had numerous affairs, but would always end up returning to his old friend and lover. He tried to help Halliwell launch a career as an artist, even arranging for a gallery to show his work, but the show was a flop, and this only heightened Halliwell's sense of inferiority. In May of 1967, the pair went on a brief holiday together in Tangier, Morocco. During the trip, Orton wrote in his diary, "We sat talking of how happy we felt and how it couldn't surely last. We'd have to pay for it, or we'd be struck down from afar by disaster because we were perhaps too happy. To be young, good-looking, healthy, famous, comparatively rich and happy is surely going against nature." Halliwell outwardly seemed as happy as Orton. Inwardly, though, he was seething, and 2 months later, in the early morning of August 10, 1967, just days after helping Orton put the finishing touches to the wicked farce, what the butler saw, undoubtedly his masterpiece, Kenneth Halliwell bludgeoned Joe Orton to death with repeated blows of a hammer to the head. He then took 21 sleeping pills and died himself. leaving behind a note that read, "If you read Orton's diary, all will be explained." Interpretation: Kenneth Helwell had tried to cast deterioration as mental illness, but what Jordan's diary revealed to him was the truth. It was envy, pure and simple, that lay at the heart of his sickness. The diaries, which Halliwell read on the slide, recounted the couple's day as equal and their struggle for recognition. After Orton found success, the diaries began to describe Halliwell's brooding, his rude comments at parties, his growing sense of inferiority. All of his Orton narrated with a distance that bordered on contempt. The diaries made clear Halliwell's bitterness over Orton's success. Eventually, the only thing that would have satisfied him would have been for Orton to have a failure of his own and unsuccessful play, perhaps, so that they would have commiserated in their failure as they had done years before when the opposite happened. As Orton grew only more successful and popular, Halliwell did the only thing that would make them equals again. He made them equals in death. With Orton's murder, he became almost as famous as his friends posthumously. Joe Orton only partly understood his lover's deterioration. His attempt to help Halliwell launch a career in art registered for what it was: charity and guilt. Orton basically had two partial solutions to the problem. He could have downplayed his own success, displaying some faults reflecting Halliwell's envy, or once he realized the nature of the problem, he could have fled as if Halliwell were a viper, as in fact he was a viper of envy. Once envy eats away at someone, everything you do only makes it grow, and day by day it festers inside him. Eventually he will attack. Only a minority can succeed at the game of life, and the minority inevitably arouses the envy of those around them. Once success happens your way, however, the people to fear the most are those in your own circle, the friends and acquaintances you have left behind. Feelings of inferiority gnaw at them. The thought of your success only heightens their feelings of stagnation, envy, which the philosopher Kierkegaard calls unhappy admiration, takes hold. You may not see it, but you will feel it someday. Unless that is, you learn strategies of deflection, little sacrifices to the gods of success. Either dampen your brilliance occasionally, purposefully revealing a defect, weakness, or anxiety, or attributing your success to luck, or simply find yourself new friends. Never underestimate the power of envy. Observance of the law. The merchant class and the craft guilds to which medieval Florence owed its prosperity and had created a republic that protected them from oppression by the nobility. Since high office could only be held for a few months, no one could gain lasting dominance, and although this meant that the political factions struggled constantly for control, the system kept out tyrants and petty dictators. The Medici family lived for several centuries under this system without making much of a mark. They had modest origins as apothecarians and were typical middle-class citizens. Not until the late 14th century, when Giovanni de' Medici made a modest fortune in banking, did they emerge as a force to be reckoned with. Upon Giovanni's death, his son Cosimo took over the family business and quickly demonstrated his talent for it. The business prospered under his control, and the Medicis emerged as one of the preeminent banking families of Europe. But they had a rival in Florence. Despite the city's republican system, one family, the Albizzi, had managed over the years to monopolize control of government, forging alliances that allowed them to constantly fill important offices with their own men. Cosimo did not fight this, and in fact gave the Albizzi his tacit support. At the same time, while the Albizzi were beginning to flaunt their power, Cosimo made a point of staying in the background. Eventually, however, the Medici wealth could not be ignored, and in 1433, feeling threatened by the family, the Albizzi used their government muscles to have Cosimo arrested on charges of conspiracy to overthrow the republic. Some in the Albizzi factions wanted Cosimo executed. Others feared this would spark a civil war. In the end, they exiled him from Florence. Cosimo did not fight the sentence. He left quietly. Sometimes he knew it's wiser to bide one's time and keep a low profile. Over the next years, the Albizzi began to stir up fears that they were setting up a dictatorship. Meanwhile, Cosimo, using his wealth to advantage, continued to exert influence on Florentine affairs even from exile. That's it, guys. Bye.